No.
He definitely has some allergies and things like that, but he has poor choices as well. Hi, everybody.
What's that? Judges 15. Judges 15.
No, they just left a mess for you. That must be
I think
Sunday's
they're checking to
mess.
see if you know where you are.
Huh?
They're checking to see if you know where you are.
I never know where I'm at. I'm just here.
How are you doing, Martha?
Well, I know you're right, because I gotta mark this.
Do you guys need any eggs?
You're doing better than I have. I don't have no mark. I have to use my memory.
I have a dozen. I just passed them out, but there's another for you.
God, y'all can't open them with a prayer.
Matt, I've got a couple of announcements
Okay.
when you're ready. Sorry, were you gonna lead a prayer?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll wait till after you're done.
Well, you can add Kay to your prayer. She fell the other day, bumped her head, which that's okay. She gave herself a knot on her head, but that's fine. But didn't break anything, but she's got a real sore hip, and she's in the hospital right now. There's a little bit of internal bleeding. They're just keeping her in there for the night to keep an eye on her because she's on blood thinners. But that's why she's not here tonight. Harold's not here. Elaine, they all traveled together. So pray for Kay. And then Laura just has a really bad headache today, so she was home.
And my son Frank, last week was told that he's going blind. He has diabetic retinopathy in his one good eye. And he's over at Salt Lake City, the university over there, to see doctors about getting his other eye with a cataract replacement, because he heard it when he was about 5 or 6 years old, and he hadn't been able to see out of his eye at all. He could see, but they finally cut the nerve when we were in Germany. So now he's trying to get the one eye he couldn't use to be the one he can use, because the one that's bleeding, the doctor said he couldn't do anything for it.
Oh, wow. That sure would be neat if they could get that one that wasn't working, huh?
It's very real possibility, because it made so many advancements.
Wow.
He was helping his mother create a table, and a piece of glass flew up off the floor and cut his eye.
Wow.
And that was 60 years ago.
Wow.
When my eye started bleeding, they took me in, shot me with the laser, cleaned it up, put a new lens in it, and I've been doing fine. And they did the other one too, so maybe they'll get him now.
Yeah.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for all your blessings. We pray, Father, that you would be with the sick. Pray for Frank and Teresa, that they might have a safe trip, returning back with us, that he might have a good report on his eye. We pray for Kay and all the others that have been sick, those that have lost loved ones, that they may be comforted as only thou art able. Forgive us of all that we've done wrong since last we stood justified in your sight. We thank you for this opportunity that we have to gather here in peace and quiet, without fear. As we enter into this hour of Bible study, may we do so with open minds and open hearts, learning better how to serve you by seeing what the people in the past have done and failed to do. Help us always to remember to turn to your word, seek your love and favor. Be with our nation, the men and women who defend our freedom. They might have safe returns back to their homes. When thou art done with us upon this earth, may we have a peaceful hour in which to depart, and may we each be with thee in eternity. For we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, we'll be picking up in Judges, chapter 15. We continue to read about Samson. Has anyone noticed as we've been reading through Judges now, it gets harder and harder and harder to understand? And that. So chapter 15. After a while, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a kid, and he said, I will go in to my wife in the chamber, but her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Pray take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be blameless in regard to the Philistines when I do them mischief. Do you remember what happened in the last chapter? When he gave the riddle to be solved, and then at the end he ended up killing 30 people to settle the difference. So in 4, so Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches, and he turned them tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up the shocks and the standing grain as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged upon you. And after that I will quit. And he smote them hip and thigh with great slaughter. And he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock at Etam. Then the Philistines came up and captained Judah and made a raid to Lehi. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? They said, we have come up to bind Samson, to do him as he did to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. And they said to him, we have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear to me that you will not fall upon me yourselves. They said to him, no, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will not kill you. So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came out shouting to meet him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes which were on his arm became as flax that has caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of an ass, and put out of his hand, and seized it, and with it he slew 1,000 men. And Samson said, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of an ass, I have slain 1,000 men. When he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called Ramoth Lehi. And he was very thirsty, and he called on the Lord and said, thou hast granted this great deliverance by the hand of thy servant, and shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? And God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and there came water from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore the name of it was called En-Hakkore. It is at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So notice, I always thought Samson was known for his strength. But we noticed that it said those ropes burned. And then notice in that he must have gotten so hot that he became very, very thirsty afterwards, and God took care of him once again. And again, it's so hard to read because remember when we read in the beginning, he was supposed to be a Nazarite. You know, he wasn't supposed to be around the dead, and yet he's doing an awful lot of killing. So I'm thinking God's use for Samson since the beginning was to smoke the Philistines. 16. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw a harlot, and he went in to her. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here, and they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They kept quiet all night, saying, let us wait till the light of the morning, then we will kill him. But Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two posts, and pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that is before Hebron. After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the Lord of the Philistines came to her and said to her, entice him, and see wherein his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to subdue him. And we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. And Delilah said to Samson, please tell me wherein your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, which have not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had men lying in wait in an inner chamber, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings as a string of tow snaps when it touches the fire, so the secret of his strength was not known. And Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Please tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if they bind me with new ropes that have not been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And the men lying in wait were in an inner chamber, but he snapped the ropes off his arms like a thread. And Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web and make it tight with the pin, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into the web, and she made them tight with the pin, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled away the pin, the loom, and the web. And she said to him, How can you say, I love you, when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me wherein your great strength lies. And when she pressed him hard with her words day after day, and urged him, his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his mind, and said to her, A razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I be shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his mind, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this once, for he has told me all his mind. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her, and brought the money in their hands. She made him sleep upon her knees, and she called the man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, The Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep, and said, I will go out as at other times, and shake myself free. And he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him, and gouged out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze feathers, and he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice, for they said, "Our God has given Samson our enemy into our hand." And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has slain many of us." And when their hearts were merry, they said, "Call Samson, that he may make sport of us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he made sport before them. They made him stand between the pillars. And Samson said to the lad who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson made sport. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me. I pray thee only this once. O God, that I may be avenged upon the Philistines for one of my two eyes." And Samson grasped the two middle pillars upon which the house rested, and he leaned his weight upon them, his right hand on the other, on one, and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he bowed with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were in it. So the dead whom he slew at his death were more than those whom he had slain during his life. Then his brother and all his family came down, took him and brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had judged Israel 20 years. Interesting. Like I said, it seemed like all along, that's what God wanted Samson to do as a Nazarite, to smelt the Philistines.
But Matt, there's in, I guess you'd call it the Christian world, they're divided. Did Samson commit suicide? Or was he doing the work of God? If he was just on himself, that makes sense, that would have been suicide, but even the Lord said, "Greater man love hath no man when he laid down his life for his friends." He did this for Israel. He was the general in a sense, and he brought down the whole government because they were there. The government of the Philistines were there, and he destroyed all of them. So God allowed him to do what he did. So it wasn't suicide.
Right.
And just to add to that, he's mentioning Hebrews 11, where God says, "Man of whom the world is not worthy." God considered him a faithful man after his death.
Which is pretty funny after the life that he lived.
Yeah.
Because he was in the prostitutes, and he was with one girl after another girl, and killing people left and right and everything. And so, it's funny how God can use all of us, despite our faults. Makes you think that he really had a moment with God after his eyes were gouged out. He was sitting in prison. He must have had a come to Jesus type moment.
Right. Yeah, this was hard for me to read because I was reading it from the standpoint that he made the Nazarite vow, but he didn't really make it. God said, "He will be a Nazarite to me," just like he had just said again here at the end. And I think that's the difference, or why so many things went on. And that, 'cause I mean, if he was dedicated to God, he definitely wouldn't have been acting the way he did. But God chose him to be a Nazarite to him, and that to basically do God's work. And God uses everyone.
We're not told all of what he did. He judged Israel for 20 years. He had to be doing something right, besides what he was doing in killing these people.
But nothing like dying and having somebody tell the dirt about your life, you know? It's like, hey,
many things that have gone on, I still wonder what it means that they judged Israel. Because, I mean, that would mean that they would have known the law of Moses, and I question how much they followed the law of Moses through all this.
Samson wasn't the only judge that used women of doubtful
Mm-hmm.
Character.
there's a word.
Yeah.
A lot of Jewish scholars are mixed concerning where the lion, the honey was in the lion. Some say that would have been unclean, but other scholars said it's probably just the bones, which is okay, according to them. So you'll find a few things here and there that is not consistent with the Nazarite, like you said. These were dead bodies all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's considered unclean, but that's
But if
bad.
a boy's hungry, a boy's hungry.
That's battle, you know.
But I notice in that last paragraph, he called, prayed to God this one more time. That was taken more like not committing suicide. It was a sacrifice he made of himself for the life he lived and this was the way he accomplished it, and the Lord let it happen. Chapter 17. There's another interesting chapter. There was a man of the hill country of Ephraim whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, the 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke it in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it, and his mother said, blessed be my son by the Lord. And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, I consecrate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it to you. So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a graven image and a molten image. And it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and teraphim, and installed one of his sons, who became his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So here we go again. It's interesting. They weren't supposed to make any graven images, any molten images. But I like here, explains what the Canaanites would make for idols. The ephod was a Canaanite thing. And the teraphim. And that is what they would use for divination, basically. And that it wasn't like the ephod that Aaron wrote.
So she took the silver and dedicated to God, and then had an idol made out of it.
Right.
That kind of cancels it out, don't it?
That's what I'm trying to get. It's been harder and harder to understand judges, and that for this reasoning, and then also, son's a priest to him.
Well, it definitely shows their lack of understanding with the Torah. They, just like nowadays, people didn't read the Word of God. It wasn't no different in those days either, as they simply did not read it and know it. And, it was left up to the priests and stuff to teach it, but they were failing in making sure that was being taught to the people.
Let's now read the next paragraph. It's very interesting that you bring that up. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to live where he could find a place. And he journeyed and came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, from where do you come? And he said to him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to sojourn where I may find a place. Micah said to him, stay with me and be me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of apparel, and your living. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as priest. Yet this Levite knows those graven images are in there, and the molten image, and this,
He jumps up to bite him.
and that. But notice, I mean, I wonder if Michael was trying to buy his way to the Lord, because notice how that reads in 10. And Micah said to him, stay with me, be me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of apparel, and your living. You know,
Well, hey, you know what I'm saying? 'Cause they were paid whether they served in the tabernacle or whatever. The people did support them and everything. But it is kind of funny, just the thought process of Micah.
I just don't quite understand, why is he asking to be me a father and a priest? You know, he's not putting the two together. I mean, me growing up a Catholic, that's what they would call priests, these fathers, and that. And I found it interesting where this is being divided up right now.
Well, especially earlier when it said that he treated him like one of his sons, so he was obviously younger than Micah. So yeah, that is interesting.
Like I said, okay. Keep me in good graces with the Lord, and I'll give you 10 pieces of silver a year. I don't know. Maybe I'm taking that all wrong, but it just seems like he's trying to buy his way into with God.
Well, they were charged to take care of the priests
True.
by law. So he was just doing what he was supposed to do.
But wouldn't they give it to the Levites? Were they in their city, in their land? Where there was.
This is a Levite, and he is paying him.
Okay, I thought it was meant to, because the Levites had their own land, or not land, but place that they dwelled in.
They could move around.
Okay.
And also, saying Micah didn't know the law is kind of weak, because they read the law 3 times a year.
Well, that was every 7 years.
Say what?
I thought it was every 7 years that the law was actually written, or spoke, I guess, read in public. But they did have their feast 3 times a year, but as far as the law being read, I thought that was a once every 7-year event.
Well, that it was written on the rock they were in.
By the river? The Jordan.
Yeah,
Well, the
AI
rock
by
that came
AI.
out of the Jordan.
Yeah. So I just enjoy it. It's just interesting how this is reading right now. Like I said, Judges is just getting harder and harder and harder to read, to understand.
We have to remember also, they didn't do everything strict either. This is an example of it, you know, so it's that they're taking the law the way they want to do it, because it appears that he really was not supposed to be the priest. He bought his way, or whatever you want to call it. That was never God's way of doing it, ever.
Right. And we also read that in verse 6 where every man was doing what is right in his own eye.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and that.
Well, in Judah, they had a right to have the priests, but Israel, the northern tribes, they had their priests, but they're not really God's priests. They're not.
Because wouldn't the correct statement be, they did everything according to the law of Moses, and under God's eye, basically, would be a more correct way to read. So it sounds like everyone had their own way they were going to treat God. 18. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in it. And for until then no inheritance among the tribes of Israel has fallen to them. Oh, I wanted to bring up before we read much farther too, we're dropping way back to the beginning of judges here again. And that this is like in the first, shortly after they crossed over to Jordan, is what we're reading about now. 2. So the Danites sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshcol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, go and explore the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? And he said to them, thus and thus has Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest. And they said to him, inquire of God, we pray thee, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people who were there, how they dwelt in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing is in the earth, and possessing wealth, and how they were far from the Sidonians, and had no dealings with anyone. And when they came to there between Azorah and Eshcol, their brethren said to them, what do you report? They said, arise and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very fertile. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go, enter in and possess the land. When you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is broad, yea, God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything in the earth. And 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set forth from Zorah and Eshcol, and went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahana and Dan. To this day, behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim, and they passed on from there to the hill country to Ephraim, and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country at Laish said to their brethren, do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, teraphim, a graven image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you will do. And they turned aside thither and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah, and asked him of his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate, and the 5 men who had gone to spy out the land went up and entered and took the graven image, the ephod, the teraphim, and the molten image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took a graven image, the ephod, the teraphim, and the molten image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, keep quiet, put your hand upon your mouth, and come with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for you to be priest to the house of one man, or to be priest to a tribe and a family in Israel? And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image and went in the midst of the people. So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the cattle and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the Danites. And they shouted to the Danites, who turned round and said to Micah, what ails you that you come with such a company? And he said, you take my gods which I made, and the priest, and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me, what ails you? And the Danites said to him, do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household. Then the Danites went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. And taking what Micah had made, and the priests who belonged to him, the Danites came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley which belongs to Beth-rehob, and they rebuilt the city and dwelt in it. And they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor, who was born into Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at the first. And the Danites set up the graven images for themselves. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his son were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's graven images, which he had made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. I was reading in that later on. Remember the two places of worship they had in the northern Israel, and then they were southern in Judah, where God wanted the temple. This is where they started the setting up in the northern territory. And I find it interesting. I mean, here they are setting up graven images, the very thing they were asked not to do, not very asked, told not to do.
What I don't understand is how they could say, give me back my gods that I made, and it makes sense to them, like it never clicked that they can't make gods, you know? That's just, yeah, it's just, you hear that and it's just so foreign that you wonder how that made sense to them.
That's a good question. I've never been able to understand that. I mean, but I got to remember I'm reading over a lot of years of time, but yet, you know, it's like I read the book of Moses, you know, not that long ago.
How do people turn away from the truth right now?
Make a choice.
We do the same thing.
Well, in a lot of ways nowadays, they just avoid it altogether. Back then, it was harder to avoid just because I don't know, I guess evil was alive and well back then, just as much of it as it is now, but it just seemed like people in the Middle East, even to this day, you don't come across atheists. You know what I'm saying? Everybody believes in God, it's just that they believe in different gods or whatever, but yeah, I don't know, I don't get it.
This is all laying the groundwork for the divided kingdom, because that's going to be coming to the kings.
Right.
You know, Judah to the south, Bethlehem, and Benjamin, that's all going to be on the south, and then the northern tribes, they're going to do their own thing like Ahab and Jezebel. You know, the people like that were far from God, and Jeremiah is trying to get them to come back to God, and they said, we will not. So it shows you right there where their mentality was, those of the north. You know, so they had their own king, they had their own kingdom and all that, but it was not ordained by God at all. And they were the first to be conquered when Israel fell to Babylon and to Assyria.
But it's just so hard to read it in Judges, and when it says the Lord is with them, we're reading it, the Lord is with them, but yet, how can he be when they're doing these things?
Well, the Lord was with Babylon too, calls Nebuchadnezzar my servant.
That's
and
true.
King Cyrus my servant, you know. God uses what's available. He never used, it seems like he never used anything that was perfect because we're far from it. But God will use whatever there is to take care of his will, and it worked.
There's other kings too that didn't live according to God's will.
Mhm.
They did things that God favored, you know, sometimes, and then they revert it. But you know, you read where there's good and bad.
Mhm.
folks in God's eyes.
And he uses them all.
Yeah.
Well,
And even the good ones
Yeah.
had faults,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah,
so.
yes.
at this time, God was the king of Israel. And he wanted to be all along king of Israel. But Israelites finally demanded to be like everybody around them.
Right.
And we tend to do the same thing in the church if we're not very, very careful.
And I think
To see
Saul
other
was-
things that people are doing that seem to be good, and we go out and endorse it.
I think Saul was the first king.
Yes,
God-
but he's a little
God
later than.
chose Saul, and at first, you know, he was doing things in favor of God's eyes,
Mhm.
and then he started drifting
He
away.
couldn't make it to the first feast.
Yeah.
Then
Saul-
Samuel had to come and be like, what are you doing?
Saul's problem was he numbered the people, and it went downhill from there. But God had chosen him.
Hmm.
He says, okay, if you want a king, I'll give you a king. And Saul was the perfect king at that time. But we see what happened to him, you know, it didn't work out. And I think there was no good kings in the north. But in the southern kingdom, what is it, 3 or 4 good
But
kings?
there's three.
Yeah, something like that. Josiah was probably the best, but then at the end, he had problems with the Egyptians? Or something like, I can't remember what the story was. But he didn't fall out of grace. He took things on his own, and he got in trouble for it. But then you have, like, King Hezekiah. The kind of king he was, God was going to take his life, but he prayed to God, and God granted him 15 more years. So you do have a few, but then the good kings, the ones come after them, just rotten to the core. I mean, they don't learn nothing at all whatsoever. So they're just like the judges. It's like a circle. They're good, then they're bad. Then they're good, then they're bad. And it just doesn't end.
Picking up in 19, is another tough one. In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine became angry with him, and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her, to speak kindly to her and bring her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of asses, and he came to her father's house. When the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. And his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay, and he remained with him 3 days. So they ate, drank, and lodged there. And on the 4th day they arose early in the morning, and he appeared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after you may go. So the 2 men sat and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, be pleased to spend the night, and let your heart be merry. And when the man rose up to go, his father-in-law urged him till he lodged there again. And on the 5th day he arose early in the morning to depart, and the girl's father said, strengthen your heart and tarry until the day declines. So they ate, both of them. And when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, behold, now the day has waned toward evening. Pray tarry all night. Behold, the day draws to its close. Lodge here and let your hearts be merry, and tomorrow you shall arise early in the morning for your journey and go home. But the man would not spend the night. He rose up and departed and arrived opposite Jebus. This is Jerusalem. He had with him a couple of saddled asses, and his concubine was with him. When they were near Jebus, the day was far spent. And the servant said to his father, come now, let us turn aside to the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. And his master said to him, we will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will pass on to Gibeah, And he said to his servant, come and let us draw near to one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or at Ramah. So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside there to go in and spend the night at Gibeah. And he went in and sat down in the open square of the city, where no man took them into his house to spend the night. And behold, an old man was coming from his work in the field at evening. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was sojourning in Gibeah. The men of the place were Benjamites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the wayfarer in the open square of the city. And the old man said, where are you going, and whence do you come? And he said to him, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went into Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to my home. And nobody takes me into his house. We have straw and provender for our asses, with bread and wine for me and your maidservant and the young man with your servants. There is no lacking of anything. And the old man said, peace be to you. I will care for all your wants. Only do not spend the night in the square. So he brought him into his house and gave the asses provender, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. As they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, base fellows, beset the house round about, beating on the door, and they said to the old man, the master of the house, bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him. And the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brethren, do not act so wickedly. Seeing that this man has come into my house, do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now. Ravish them and do with them what seems good to you. But against this man do not do so vile a thing. But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and put her out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as the morning appeared, a woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was till it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and when he opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, behold, there was his concubine lying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, get up, let us be going. But there was no answer. Then he put her upon the ass, and the man rose up and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and laying hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, such a thing had never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak. Where have we read a story similar to this?
Mm-hmm.
And that, wasn't that in about Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah? And that, I mean,
Isn't it funny, the guy just gave them his concubine? He gave it to them. So.
But it didn't say anything about.
No, it was him or her.
that's Andy?
The old man sent his daughter out too, but they didn't say anything about her.
She might have not made it home. And by the sounds of it, she probably didn't make it to the door.
No.
And now again, we're even moving back closer to where they crossed over, because as we read on, anyways, we'll read on. My glasses stop. Then all the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, And the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And the chiefs of all the people of all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men on foot that drew the sword. Now the Benjamites heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the people of Israel said, "Tell us how was this wickedness brought to pass?" And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "I came to Gibeah that belongs to Benjamin and my concubine to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house round about me by night. They meant to kill me. And they ravished my concubine, and she is dead. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed abomination and wantonness in Israel. Behold, you people of Israel, all you, give your advice and counsel here." And all the people rose as one man, saying, "We will not any of us go to his tent, and none of us will return to his house. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot, and we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, to bring provisions for the people, that when they come they may requite Gibeah of Benjamin for all the women wanton crime, which they have committed in Israel." So all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one man. And the tribes of Israel sent men through all this tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What wickedness is this that has taken place among you? Now therefore give up the men, the base fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death, and put away evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the people of Israel. And the Benjamites came together out of the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the people of Israel. And the Benjamites mustered out of their cities on that day 26,000 men that drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who mustered 700 picked men. Among all these were 700 picked men who were left-handed. Every one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. And the men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men that drew the sword. All these were men of war. The people of Israel arose and went up to Bethel and inquired of God, which of us shall go up first to battle against the Benjamites? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. Then the people of Israel rose in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel drew up the battle line against them at Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and fell to the ground on that day 22,000 men of the Israelites. But the people, the men of Israel, took courage and again formed the battle line in the same place where they had formed it on the first day. And the people of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until the evening. And they inquired of the Lord, shall we again draw near to battle against our brethren, the Benjamites? And the Lord said, go up against them. So the people of Israel came near against the Benjamites the second day, and Benjamin went against them out of Gibeah the second day, and fell to the ground 18,000 men of the people of Israel. All these were men who drew the sword. Then all the people of Israel, the whole army, went up and came to Bethel and wept. And they sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days, and Phinehas the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, ministered before it in those days, saying, shall we yet again go out to battle against our brethren, the Benjamites, or shall we cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands. Now this time here, was different. Phineas is the one, Eleazar's son, basically. So that's how early they crossed over. Because remember, Eleazar put in the grave right at about the crossing of the Jordan. Now Phineas' son is overseeing it. But notice, and that how this paragraph ends. It says, go up tomorrow, and notice what's different about it. I will give them into your hands. It doesn't say that the other two times, that he was going to give them into their hands. 29. So Israel set men in ambush round about Gibeah, and the people of Israel went up against the Benjamites on the third day and set themselves in array against Gibeah as at other times. And the Benjamites went out against the people and were drawn away from the city. And as at other times, they began to smite and kill some of the people in the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, and in the open country, about 30 men of Israel. And the Benjamites said, they are routed before us as at the first. But the men of Israel said, let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. And all the men of Israel rose up out of their place and set themselves in array at Baal Tamar, and the men of Israel who were in ambush rushed out of their place west of Geba, and there came upon against Gibeah 10,000 picked men out of all Israel. And the Benjamites did not know that disaster was close upon them. And the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And the men of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day. All these were men who drew the sword. So the Benjamites saw that they were defeated. The men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin because they trusted to the men in ambush whom they had set against Gibeah. And the men in the ambush made haste and rushed upon Gibeah. The men in ambush moved out and smote all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that when they rise up out of the city, the men of Israel should turn in battle. They began to smite and kill about 30 men of Israel. They before us, as in the began to rise out of the smoke. The Benjamites looked. The whole of the city went. Then the men of Israel turned dismayed, for they saw that disaster. Therefore they turned in the direction of the Lord took them. In the midst of them, cutting down the Benjamites from Noha, 18,000 men of Benjamin fell and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. 5,000 men of them were cut down in the highways, and they were pursued hard to Gidom, and 2,000 men of them were slain. So all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men that drew the sword, all of them men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock at Rimmon, and abode at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the Benjamites and smote them with the edge of the sword, men and beasts, all that they found, and all the towns which they found, they set afire. Pretty sad. These were all fellow Israelite people that, they gave them a chance. I mean, all they had to do is give up the men that had done that, and this is how the Benjamite nation basically chose their fate.
The tribe of Benjamin almost ceased to exist.
Well, we'll read about that here in the future, because all the women died too. They had, anyways, we'll read about it in the next chapters. I probably better stop there.
Are you gonna go into Ruth after this chapter?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Better up here.
386. Do we have anything before we, song before we close? Let's remember, of course, Sunday, Lord willing. Barbara and I are still working on the directory. We got about 4 directories we've got and try to put them together. So we're still trying to get a hold of people for birthdays, anniversaries. Some of them have moved and some no longer are here anymore. So hopefully we can get it this week or next week.
I can't remember the name. Someone died in Meeker, and that congregation is down to 4 people, 2 men and 2 women now. And they're just asking people if they could just go to the service in Meeker if you can, just to show support there to the.
Was it the older lady?
It is, yes. And so that's Saturday, I think at 11. And so,
Is there a funeral?
yes,
Yeah, we got a funeral coming up too.
at the church. And then I think there's gonna be a dinner following at the fairgrounds,
Okay, and
so.
yeah, let's remember that. I can't remember her name.
Joyce Bouchard.
Joyce?
No, that's the one that's here, the one in
Hayden.
Meeker.
Oh, yeah, the one in Meeker. I can't
I wanna
remember.
say Deborah or Robert or something like that. What was her
Well,
name?
or is that the daughter? That's the thing.
Well, I can't remember. We've seen them this summer
know.
though,
I know,
at
that's
the ladies retreat. Yeah, I can't remember what her name. I want to say Deborah or Barbara or something, but that might be her daughter.
I know, that's where I know one of them is that name, but for some reason, I can't tell you.
Yeah. And we have Joyce's funeral, was it Saturday?
Sunday. It's Sunday
Sunday?
at 1:30.
Okay.
Oh, so the same,
Well, that one's Saturday and the other one's
Yeah.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Let's remember that. Remember those people in our prayers, the ones that have lost loved ones. 386. Why did the Savior heavenly and come to earth below, when in his grace would not receive, because he loves me so? He loves me, he loves me, he loves me, this I know. He gave himself to die for me, because he loves me so. Why did the Savior mark the way, and why temptation know? Why teach and toil and plead and pray, because he loves me so. He loves me, he loves me, he loves me, this I know. He Righteous Father, as we approach you, we ask that you be with us. This time that we set aside to study a portion of your word, to sing songs of praise, and to pray to you, we ask, Father, that you be with those that was mentioned, those that have lost loved ones. We ask that you be with them, each and every one of them. Be with the families, Father, as they carry on and do the business of your work. We ask, Holy Father, that you continue to watch over us. Be with us, give us the strength and courage to always be able to proclaim your Son, wherever the need may be, to never ever be ashamed of your Son, Jesus Christ. We ask, Father, that you be with the leaders of our land, that you be with our first responders.